Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Cloud is Calling. I am absolutely honored to be joined here today by none other than Katherine Walther, who is our VP of Innovation and Ambassador for Women in Tech. Katherine, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm very excited to be here today and talk about what I get to do for a living, which I think is tons of fun.
Absolutely, it's tons of fun. First and foremost, on the subject of women in tech, earlier this year we talked about partnering with Girls Who Code and the outreach that they do and their overall program. Can you just kind of share your thoughts, your overall feeling about their program, what we're doing with them as it helps promote getting more women into technology positions?
Yeah, it's actually a wonderful program, and I personally have seen the output of this program even before Trace 3 started to make the investment towards this incredible organization. We had hired an intern who spent quite a bit of time with Girls Who Code. This intern Olivia, she was amazing. Every week, or not every week, but every summer that goes by, I'm like, please, I'll hire you back. Come back. That was amazing. And what that really shows is it gives these young women an opportunity to get their hands on technology that maybe they didn't otherwise have. And sometimes I think even in formal education, it gives them an opportunity, it gives them a community to be able to express and understand a space that I think they wouldn't have otherwise understood before. I'm all, I've been in IT for 25 years. I'm all for more girls, more women in IT.
No, and that's awesome. And you are a part of a fantastic lineup that I wanted to make sure that we highlighted as part of the show. We've got five women who are joining me as guests on this show because as somebody who has a daughter, I absolutely believe in getting more women in tech. She loves to, even at an early age, she would come in my office, play on the keyboard. She loves to move the mouse around, do the iPad. So she is very much into all things technical. And part of what makes me so passionate about that is just seeing how much joy that doing that stuff around what I do, but making an impact in so many other people who have different ideas, have different opinions, and I feel like the more we can bring in to that and kind of broaden our guild, so to speak, the better off everyone will be for it.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree more.
All right, switching gears to what you do. Um, you interact with a lot of very interesting folks, and those folks are mostly venture capitals and high level enterprises, leaders throughout our glorious industry. And I'm curious to see cloud is obviously a very broad umbrella topic. And so it's very hard to classify cloud as one topic, but I think of it as just kind of this overarching umbrella. But what investments do you see venture capitals and other enterprises and vendors making inside of the cloud space? Is there a particular area that's been key or a particular focus of them over the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and let's set the stage on a couple of things. Um, Cloud has become, the standard, the de facto standard. So when we look at investments, even when we look at investments that are occurring in what would be traditionally maybe infrastructure or operations, it has a cloud lens, has a cloud focus to it. Nothing shows that better than, say, multi-cloud networking solutions, and that has been an interesting area of investment. Moving into something that is cloud focused only, where you can say, hey, that probably only touches cloud. Very excited about Kubernetes cluster management solutions that are coming out. I think it addresses a real problem that most organization leaders might not be fully clued into because of the complexities that come along with Kubernetes and Kubernetes clusters in particular. But when we look at the majority of the investment, I think the majority of the investment really truly still sits with security. I mean, cloud is going to be the front line without a perimeter for like the next decade, right? Before we sort of figure that out. And so cloud security and all of that entails, most people will say cloud security, maybe you're talking about cloud security posture management. I'm really talking about the entire security stack that has probably a lot of investment, but also a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. And just for general purposes, why are these investments so important, right? As we're seeing, right, the cloud security space expand, edge use cases expand, Kubernetes expanding. What's so important about them making these investments in these particular areas?
Yeah, I think we're looking at a perfect storm. So if you think about the data center, how long it took us to build up the data center and all the controls around the data center and understand our adversaries in the data center. I mean, we're talking about decades, right? We're just talking about decades of time and growth that we put into that. But with cloud, and then cloud, as we're concluding a pandemic where so many organizations change their strategy overnight, or supply chain caused them to change their strategy, it means that we are faced with new problems at a rapid rate. We're faced with new challenges that we were not faced with when we were simply in the data center, guarding the four walls. So I think the reason that the investment is so large that we see is also because the problems are also continuing to grow. I mean, we're talking about cloud security today and data, cloud data security tomorrow. But we still have so many other challenges to address with identity, with hygiene. I mean, if we again say that, cloud is the front line without a perimeter, then hygiene has to come back into focus. So I think what we're looking at is the reason now, or the reason that it's in so much volume, is because that perfect storm. We've moved so quickly into something that we didn't have also the same amount of time to skill up for. Over time, if you can go back and think about this, certainly in the beginning of my career, it was people were so excited to just get like a Microsoft certification, and then they were able to do incredible things with Active Directory or Exchange, and when you
That's all they needed, right? They just needed the one.
Needed.
Yeah, like I got my one. Yeah, I got my MCSA. Like I'm set.
Yes.
And now it's like if you don't have 10 certifications, you're falling behind.
Yeah, and so I think that there's that. I think we're always going to be chasing the skills gap,
Yes.
but there's also the volume gap that I don't think humans will ever catch up to now. And whether you look at it in volume of change, or volume of expansion, volume of scale, volume of data, volume of assets, those are not changing. And I think that what we've just seen is that it's expanded beyond human capabilities, and we have to rely on those enablers that we've been growing for the last decade.
Yeah. Now, dovetailing off some of the things that you were talking about, and I don't want you to disclose any particular names, but what cool tech have you seen that you think that will make waves
Okay.
in the cloud
And
space?
you don't want me to say names?
I don't want you to say names.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Trying to be nice. I mean,
So,
your discretion, guest discretion.
right.
I totally up to you.
So let's talk about where volume is, and we're excited about it. So I would say it feels like it's unprecedented volume in the cloud data security space. Gartner has named the term, DSPM, so data security posture management. I can opine that I think that's a temporary term, but what we've seen is a couple of things. We've seen 13 solutions be invested in the last couple of years. That's almost unprecedented. Do we have a couple of favorites? Of course we do. But what it signifies is the ability to bring together previously siloed areas like identity, previously siloed areas like data access governance, previously siloed areas like data activity monitoring, into a single tool, agentlessly, and be able to give us that visibility. And as my good friend Will from Fourth Point Capital says, that every time we restart this, we restart visibility before we can get into detection and response. You know, we're just sort of in that pivot area with you know, CSPM, with the cloud security posture management, starting to move into some loose definitions of cloud detection and response. We're at that visibility point with data, and we're very excited about what that has to offer, because for the first time, we don't need, you know, 4 solutions to protect our data or to even get eyes on our data. So we're really excited about that. I think I'm in love, with this burgeoning area of just-in-time authorization. And if you're listening to this and you're rolling your eyes and you're like, how is this emerging person talking about just-in-time authorization? Haven't we been talking about this for quite some time? But the reason we're excited about it now is because there is some open standards that were developed out of some very large companies to truly address frictionless, just-in-time authorization. And I think what we've seen over the years is that, you know, role-based access control, it doesn't scale at the same rate that cloud scales. And so for us to look at solutions that are starting to disrupt that concept is very, very exciting for us, and disrupt it in a way that makes sense, that starts to address the hire to retire, you know, sort of all of these challenges that we've seen. So those are 2 areas that we are just, you know, over the moon excited about, you know, without naming names,
No,
that
without
I
naming
think are
names.
going to be real disruptive.
Yeah. No, I think role-based access control got us to a point, right, with the advent of cloud, and this just-in-time authorization is really just the next evolution of that. I don't see, and because I've spent some time looking into that space as well, it's taking rollback even further, right? To your point, scaling it, because it role-based scaled to a point, but then we ran into those challenges. We've seen cloud providers introduce loose technologies around that, and you know, they screamed from their tower like, hey, implement this, do this from a security perspective, and people, some people did, but a lot of people didn't, because it affected the workflow, and that was hard for them to justify it. So I'm actually super excited to see some of these solutions start coming into the market and provide that frictionless capability, and really see how it can help transform organizations and how they think about addressing some of those challenges. So I'm equally as excited as you.
Yeah, no doubt.
Um,
I mean, I think we could definitely go down a little rabbit hole
oh, we could go down a very
on
large
this,
rabbit
but
hole.
what I think it represents, and actually I think data security is representing this too, is that um, identity is something that can no longer just be relegated to the identity team. Identity needs to, you know, find partnerships across all of the other teams within an organization, and likewise with all the other teams finding that partnership with identity. And I think that that is, you know, if we talk about the macro trend that that's ushering in, and the mindset of, you know, leaders where they need to change and rethink maybe policy or procedures, it's going to be getting closer, you know, bringing these different disparate, once were previously disparate teams together.
No, absolutely. And you know, it's funny. The more I hear you think about that being partnerships and these teams reaching out to the others, I've seen certain articles from some people saying, "Oh, DevOps is dead. Like the whole, you know, blending of the teams isn't working." And maybe to an extent, you know, DevOps might have outlived its usefulness, and we're transitioning more to SRE and maybe going back to a little bit more of a siloed approach. But I still think it's key, to your point, maintaining those communication lines, those partnerships, because if we go back to truly siloed approaches, we're repeating a mistake that we've hopefully learned our lesson. If we haven't, then yeah, I honestly, I don't have any words for that, and from
But
that standpoint,
it's so true. This is,
it
I
is.
I think this is the problem, not the problem. This is the crux of adopting emerging technology. because it should force an organization to adopt new culture and new policies that go along with it. And in many, many ways, like this is the bonus of kind of what our group does when we're providing advice, which is let me show you what the future looks like so that you can start to reshape the way your culture is or the way your teams are communicating with each other. And I think that that's, that is the crux of when we look at some of these solutions on, were they successful or not successful? I mean, if you look at DevOps, was it successful? Was it not successful? Well, in the organizations that were successful with it, they are enjoying the benefits of that. But they were more successful with it, not because they bought the DevOps, but because they adopted the concepts.
Mm-hmm. People and process. So I was on LinkedIn the other day, and
Okay.
I want to get your take on this. So I saw a gentleman post a very radical opinion, and because we've been talking about cloud security. He basically blamed um, the failure, or what he viewed as the failure of Uber and others on their cloud security, is the cloud itself, and that we all just need to abandon the cloud, return to on-prem, to heck with all of them, like it's a national security risk, et cetera, et cetera. How would you respond to somebody who has essentially that type of opinion? Because I'm sure he's not alone. I'm sure there's plenty of others out there who are like, you know what, the cloud is still very much dangerous, even though we're a decade and a half into cloud at this point. It's not going anywhere. What are your thoughts around somebody who's like that? Because I'm sure there's plenty of others out there who feel that way.
So I think, the concept of one space or one domain to rule them all or one area to rule them all, there's comfort in that, right? There's comfort in what you know. There's comfort in the systems that were built to protect it. But what I think has happened is that the genie is out of the bottle. And when you can move at the speed of cloud, the genie is out of the bottle. And in order to address, what's been happening with these companies, this is the technology moving faster than the people, than the policies. And in order to clean those houses up, you have to go back and look at ways to incorporate security from shift left all the way to shield right. And I know that sounds like a lot, or repeating what people are saying a lot, but I think that becomes the reality of it. Understanding that because cloud is coming out with new capabilities all of the time, that traditional data center just was not going to be able to incorporate, certainly at any sort of scale, that simply saying, hey, shut it down, it's not safe, let's move back to where we knew it was safe, we have all these challenges with controls in place. I think that's probably an unrealistic utopia. Having said that, I do think that there are companies, if you look at some of the larger, more regulated companies, they are slower to adopt. They have they've probably done something that might make more sense, which is purposeful application of the cloud. Hey, I just need to burst here, or we just need to use this compute there. And maybe, maybe there is a middle ground between the purposeful use of it. Having said that, you are not going to control now that genie is out of the bottle. So I think it starts to come down to having to embrace new methodologies. I read this incredible quote, which I hope I don't butcher it, but I probably will. But the quote was something like, our cloud security our cloud security models have fallen out of love, right? Or maybe our security models have fallen out of love, which means that our old security models with our new cloud domain, they're not a good match. And that is what has to come back into a symbiotic relationship. And I think today, the only reason or the only way that that's going to happen is by, having everything from the developers forward, the identity administrators forward, always move with this concept of accountability, because that's really what he's talking about, is like our accountability in the data center, traditional data center, was much less.
Oh
Our
yeah.
accountability in cloud is so much more. We have this accountability to the policies that we set forward, our accountability to the data that's out there. It's harder to control somebody who's copying and pasting data or downloading data, when they're moving it from data store to data store, or some sort of pattern that way, when it was easier to do it from one drive to the next if it was just an internal piece. So I think it's this accountability that the leadership of companies, non-technical leadership, needs to embrace, which I think is going to open up a whole different set of opportunities in this space.
Awesome. Well, I felt like that was your little nugget, like you did with our fusion team nugget bomb. So I think Catherine's nugget for this is accountability, and that is the message going forward. Um, One last question before we wrap up. For me, cloud security was the theme of 2022, and in my eyes, and I don't know if you necessarily agree with this, data is going to be the theme for 2023. Would you agree?
100%. Data security is the new cloud security.
Yeah. So if you're not starting to embrace data, if you're somebody who's like, oh, like I don't like doing databases or data or whatever, you've got time. Get started now. It's going to be very useful for you here soon. Catherine, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure having you on the show, and hopefully we will. Well, let me rephrase this. Not hopefully, absolutely, we will be bringing you back for more sessions, and maybe even do like a little roundtable between our evangelist team and the innovation team. I think we have a fairly entertaining conversation amongst the group. So,
I love
all
it.
right.
Thank you so much for having me on. And the conversation was fantastic. We could have gone down and kept going.
We could have been at this for a few hours if we needed to, which we have done from time to time. All right, folks, we've got another great episode coming up for you next. We'll be speaking to Gina Yacone, who is our advisory CISO. So if you enjoyed some of these little nuggets of cloud security, we will be diving into this a bit more specifically with her. So stay tuned for that episode. And remember, folks, the cloud is calling.